Srila Prabhupada ki. Awkward seating arrangement. Maybe you guys can sit a little in now, otherwise it becomes a little thick. Is this thing going?
It's on.
Okay. Thanks. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutabadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're reading today from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, entitled Questions by Vidura. And today we're taking a look at the final verse of the chapter, which is verse number 45. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Still getting there, huh? Okay. 3:1:45. Got it? Yeah. Okay. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Avastitanam anushashane sve. Ardaya jatasya yadushvajasya. Vartam sake kirtaya tirta kirtehe. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Avastitanam anushasane sve. Ardaya jatasya yadushvajasya. Vartam sake kirtaya tirta kirtehe. Please chant. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Avastitanam anushasane sve. Ardaya jatasya yadushvajasya. Vartam sake kirtaya tirta kirtehe. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Avastitanam anushasane sve. Artaya jatasya yadushvajasya. Vartam sake kirtaya tirta kirtehe. Tasya prapana kila lokapanam. Avastitanam anushasane sve. Artaya jatasya yadushvajasya. Vartam sake kirtaya tirta kirtehe. Tasya is prapana, surrendered. Akila lokapanam, all rulers of the entire universe. Avastitanam, situated in. Anushasane, under the control of. Sve, own self. Artaya, for the interest of. Jatasya, of the born. Yadushu, in the family of the Yadus. Ajasya, of the unborn. Vartam, topics. Sake, oh my friend. Kirtaya, please narrate. Tirta kirtehe, of the Lord, whose glories are chanted in the places of pilgrimage. Translation. O my friend, please therefore chant the glories of the Lord, who is meant to be glorified in the places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears by his causeless mercy upon the surrendered rulers of all parts of the universe. Only for their interest did he appear in the family of his unalloyed devotees, the Yadus. Purport. There are innumerable rulers all over the universe, in different varieties of planets. The sun god in the sun planet, the moon god in the moon planet, Indra in the heavenly planet, Vayu, Varuna, and those in the Brahmaloka planet, where Lord Brahma is living. All are obedient servants of the Lord. Whenever there is any trouble in the administration of the innumerable planets in different universes, the rulers pray for an appearance, and the Lord appears. The Bhagavatam has already confirmed this in the following verse. Ete chanksha kala pungsa krishnastu bhagavan swayam indriyadi vyakulam lokam mridayanti yuge yuge. In every millennium, whenever there is any trouble for the obedient rulers, the Lord appears. He also appears for the sake of his pure unalloyed devotees. The surrendered rulers and the pure devotees are always strictly under the control of the Lord, and they are never disobedient to the desires of the Lord. The Lord is therefore always attentive to them. The purpose of pilgrimage is to remember the Lord constantly, and therefore the Lord is known as Tirtha Kirti. The purpose of going to a place of pilgrimage is to get the chance to glorify the Lord. Even today, although times have changed, there are still pilgrimage sites in India. For example, in Mathura and Vrindavan, where we had a chance to stay, people are awake from early in the morning at 4 a.m. up until night time, and are constantly engaged some way or other in chanting the holy glories of the Lord. The beauty of such a pilgrimage site is that automatically one remembers the holy glories of the Lord. His name, fame, quality, form, pastimes, and entourage are all identical to the Lord, and therefore chanting the glories of the Lord invokes the personal presence of the Lord. Anytime or anywhere pure devotees meet and chant the glories of the Lord is always present without a doubt. It is said by the Lord himself that he always stays where his pure devotees chant his glories. Tasyapapana kilalokapanam avastitanam anushasane sway Ataya jatasya vidushvajasya vartam sake kirtaya tirtha kirtaye. O my friend, please therefore chant the glories of the Lord, who is meant to be glorified in the places of pilgrimage. He is unborn, and yet he appears by his causeless mercy upon the surrendered rulers of all parts of the universe. Only for their interest did he appear in the family of his unalloyed devotees, the Yadus. So we see here the meeting of Vidura who met Uddhava. The Bhagavatam is largely a collection of discussions and dialogues between different individuals. And we see that the dialogue forms really nice. If we look today at the Wisdom of the Sages podcast, is basically the same thing. It is two people that are discussing Krishna's glory, and somehow in the discussion between the devotees, more and more of Krishna's glory becomes magnified and projected, and also because it is specifically through the personalities of the devotees themselves that we actually get an idea. It is reflected through their personalities, because each devotee, he has a specific excitement and interest in Krishna. And therefore that is the fascinating thing. Therefore we have to hear about the glories of Krishna through the devotee. Otherwise, that greatly magnifies our ability to appreciate and understand Krishna's glories. So the Bhagavatam is then primarily the discussion between Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. But in that discussion, there's many other dialogues are also happening within that. And here we're now seeing the start of a great dialogue by Vidura and Uddhava. And then later we will also see the dialogue between Vidura and Maitreya, as he then explains what he had heard, as Uddhava will direct Vidura to Maitreya. Now Vidura's situation here is that the last time he saw his family alive was when he left the palace out of disgust after being chased away by Duryodhana. And he left for a very long pilgrimage, a 13-year pilgrimage, just left everything. So we see in the previous verses, even though he was part of the royal family, he just left everything behind. He left his wealth, and he left his part of the political intrigues of the palace, and he just left. And now on his way back, the first person he met was Uddhava. And at this point, everything had already been done. The war had already been lost or won. Everybody had died, and he will now hear from Uddhava what has happened. And then soon after that, he will go towards the palace of the Pandavas and try to pull out his brother, pull out Dhritarashtra out of that palace, and in that sense repay his debt to his brother. So somehow Vidura was always affectionate to his brother, which is very interesting. And we see that somehow that is a great mercy of being... sometimes devotees can be merciful unto us, even though we are not really acting properly. That is the interesting nature. You see, Dhritarashtra was the cause, in one sense, of the Great War. He had repeatedly disregarded his brother's good advice, and because of him, ultimately, so many people had to die. But we see that Vidura, he maintained the desire to somehow benefit his brother. And he again went back to try to see if he can speak some good sense into him. So that we are greatly fortunate if the devotees are somehow so concerned about us that even when we get into trouble, or we get covered by the material energy, or we get thrown into illusion, that still the devotees will come and they will still try to help us out. And that is the greatest mercy of the devotees. And if you have ever been the recipient of that, then you will know, you have to be very grateful, isn't it? Sometimes it does happen to us. Now we see here Prabhupada in his purport speaks about an interesting thing that comes out of the verse, where it's explained how the Lord, everybody is chanting the Lord's glories, and specifically the Lord is merciful upon the Akila Lokapanam, upon the surrendered rulers of all the planets. Prapana Akila Lokapanam. And you're referring obviously to the higher regions and all the great demigods who are in one sense responsible for the maintenance of this universe. Prabhupada says very interesting. It says that the surrendered rulers and the pure devotees are always strictly under the control of the Lord. So we see in the Bhagavatam deals basically with 4 kinds of characters, or 3 kinds of characters, one could say. The first is, it deals with the devotees. It tells the stories of the pure devotees, those who have pure love of God, completely surrendered. And then we see another character that is in the Bhagavatam is the demigods, those individuals who are not necessarily pure, but they are taking responsibility. They're taking responsibility for maintaining the universe and for running the Krishna's program in this world. And then you see it's also explained that there is the demons, and the demons are also there. And these are the 3 kinds of beings that are in this universe. And you see here that it's referred to specifically that it is both those who are surrendered rulers and the pure devotees, that they are always under the control of the Lord, and that they are never disobedient to the desires of the Lord, and that the Lord is therefore always attentive to them. So we see that to obtain Krishna's attention, that is the real goal of Krishna consciousness, that is our real hope, is to be the recipient of Krishna's mercy. And the most basic form of Krishna's mercy, you could say the foundation of Krishna's mercy, is to receive Krishna's attention. We see that in all relationships also, that is the basic form of love, is to be the recipient of someone's attention. We see that children, for example, the success of children, their healthy upbringing, to a large part simply depends on getting the attention of their parents. And even if the parents are not that apt, or they have so many other things, they make so many mistakes and so many other things are there, but if they can consistently just give their child attention, then that already is like 80% of the work done. Because it is the illusion of the material energy, the foundational illusion of this world, is the illusion that we are somehow alone or separated from Krishna. And it is that sense of separation that brings about the intense fear and anxiety and insecurity and uncertainty that characterizes the material world. So by receiving Krishna's attention, by receiving someone's attention, that immediately fulfills a deep need in us. And also there is no way that you can give your attention to someone if you do not love that person. And there can be no love if there is no attention. We see that one of the main causes, did some studies on relationships that break, like marriages and these things. And the root cause, many times people would say, they would acknowledge that it is because they do not receive attention. Like even if you speak to someone, they do not listen to you. And that starts eroding a relationship. And obviously in the modern world that's very, very difficult. To pay attention is very difficult. Even when you're speaking to people nowadays, it's very difficult to have people that can sustainably even listen to what you're saying long enough to not look on their phones or get distracted. And also it is more and more people, they lose the ability, their minds are too disturbed even to pay attention to other people anymore. Because your cell phone is in one sense, how modern media and specifically the modern technology is organized, is that it is all organized around your selfish preference. So it's all about customizing your experience according to your personal selfish desires. And therefore it is possible to be so engrossed in your cell phone for hours on end, because it all is just revolving around your own deep, personal, selfish, material desires, and organized very nicely around it. And then you have algorithms that pick up what exactly are your specific desires, and then they make sure to throw you more and more content that feed those desires. And then the moment that you start speaking to another individual, and then you look at them and then you realize, well, this person has all kinds of desires, there's nothing to do with my desires. They have all kinds of needs, it's nothing to do with my needs. And it's much more boring and actually way more energy intensive to look at them and to speak about them, because it's not really customized according to my desires and my plan and my idea of how things should be and my specific preference for how things should be. And therefore people are losing the ability to have any kind of relationships. And we see all over the world a class of humans arising that are completely socially inept and unable to actually have real positive relationships. In Japan you have the, what are they called? Ikikomoris. Have you heard of the ikikomoris? The ikikomoris is a new breed of Japanese men who simply do not want anything to do with the world. They simply stay in their rooms and play computer games. They don't want to get married, they don't want to have families, they don't want to do anything. They experience great depression and social anxiety, and they're simply happy to be in their room with their devices, not wanting to go out and actually deal or face with the world. And now in America I'm sure you have the equivalent of ikikomoris all over the place. And we're just waiting for the new subculture to start, for people to brand themselves and then have an identity. So that is what happens. So attention, a very dangerous thing to do. So it requires a lot of strength actually to be able to give one attention to other people. And therefore we see that here we have it clearly. Why is it that the surrendered rulers are also able, or also entitled to a certain extent to Krishna's attention? Because we see that Prabhupada explains in the third verse, the purport of the third verse of the Ishopanishad. Prabhupada makes the opening statement, and he says how, in that verse it is explained how the killers of the soul, they enter into the darkest regions of ignorance. And Prabhupada opens up the purport and he explains, he says, human life is distinguished from animal life by its great responsibilities. So responsibility, specifically the responsibility that the surrendered rulers of the universe take up, that responsibility means you take responsibility for other people's welfare. And that is the basic root of what distinguishes a demigod from a demon, is the ability to take responsibility for things that are important for other people's welfare. And it is that ability to do that, that sacrifice, to extend your own sense of concern and your own sense of what is important and the own sense of things that will now disturb you in your life. Because responsibility means disturbance. That's what it means. The moment you become responsible for anything within the material world, then it means it requires your attention. And it will force you to give your energy to it. That's what it means. Why, if you get a job, why are they willing to pay you so much money? Because they need your attention. They need your attention to make sure that some aspect of that organization is properly maintained. And the moment no one pays attention to anything in this world, what will happen? It will go to hell. Simple as that. Whatever it is in this world. The moment that no attention is sustaining it, it will just dwindle and it will vanish. And all occupations are ultimately just a specific concentration of human attention in order to make sure that things don't go to hell. Even if you're an accountant, what are you ultimately doing? What's an accountant doing? He's simply paying attention to the flow of money. Because if no one is paying attention, if not proper accounting, you can bet your bottom dollar that things will start going awkward and people will start stealing and money will start disappearing. So it is this attention then that the demigods, the devotees of the Lord, they are distinguished because their attention is fully simply fixed. The pure devotee is simply fixed on Krishna's lotus feet, on the absorption in Krishna's qualities, in Krishna's name, in Krishna's pastimes, because they are in love with Krishna as a person. And therefore they are naturally, Krishna is naturally very willing to pay his attention to them, because they are so willing to pay attention to him personally. But for those who are not yet pure at heart, who are still connected with the material energy, but who still have a desire to be obedient to Krishna's desire, but who might not be able to fully fix their mind yet on a personal meditation on Krishna's form, qualities and pastimes. For those people there is another process. And that process is to take responsibility for Krishna's interests. And in that way, you start working for Krishna's mission, in one sense, wherever it is within this world. It means you're willing to take some responsibility. You're willing to take some of your attention and dedicate it according to Krishna's concern and Krishna's desire. And therefore, you also become eligible for Krishna's mercy and eligible for Krishna's protection. And slowly what will happen is you become purified, and you become able to more and more focus your mind on Krishna directly. And that is the whole goal. That's why we are taking responsibility. And therefore the Lord is then explained to be here, those individuals, both the surrendered rulers and the pure devotees, they are always obedient to the desires of the Lord. And therefore the Lord is always attentive to them. And to be on the receiving end of Krishna's attention, that is great mercy, because that is really the basis of Krishna's protection that he offers us, is that he is sustainably interested in our welfare. And we see that ultimately Krishna never abandons any living being, but to those who are not interested in being obedient to Krishna, Krishna places them under the care of the material energy. So he doesn't abandon them, but he places them in the care of a ward, just like a little orphan is placed not in the care of the parents, but in the care of some other person. And that material energy, she takes care of the living beings. She gives them a place to live. She gives them a program. She gives them a place to stay. She gives them a kind of work, but it's brutal. It's a brutal existence. Because the material energy is not loving in the ultimate, as Krishna is. Her only concern is to ensure that the living beings take birth and that the living beings die. And in that process experience the reality of what it is if you're not willing to take responsibility or not willing to pay any attention to Krishna or Krishna's interests. And you have full freedom to only pay attention to yourself and your own interests. And then you see what that leads to you. So the Lord here is described also therefore naturally as the Kirtya Tirtha Kirtaye, that he is the purpose of the place of pilgrimage. And that is what you see, amazing, how Vidura, he just went on a 13-year pilgrimage. So many places he went. And the only goal of his pilgrimage was just to go to these various places and to meet those individuals that are consistently absorbed in chanting Krishna's glories. And that is the amazing thing when you go to India. You go to India, you go to these places, a holy place of pilgrimage, something that we don't really know about. We have some nice cities in America, all these cities and all kinds of cool places, but you don't have anything like that, a place of pilgrimage that's just for thousands of years. That's why people go there. They simply go there to chant the glories of the Lord and be absorbed in that. And it is an amazing opportunity to do that. Joseph also, we actually met, the first time we met was in a place of pilgrimage, in the prasadam line of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. And somehow we see that these places are very powerful. And the beauty, as Prabhupada says, of such a place of pilgrimage is that automatically one remembers the holy glories of the Lord. So therefore we see that to sustainably be absorbed in Krishna's glories, one needs the support of a favorable environment to protect us from the distracting influence of the material energy, which is ever prowling. Like we see in the Bible, the image that the devil is always prowling like a tiger or like a lion, like a hungry lion, always prowling outside. And we see that for us, we understand, yes, if the material energy is always ready at any moment to absorb our attention. She's waiting. She's beckoning. And with the promise that here, if you take shelter, if you absorb your attention in my direction, you will be able to have it customized according to your personal preference. That is what she offers us. And but the devotees understand that no, there's much more ecstasy, and is much more natural, and ultimately my real nature is to be absorbed in Krishna's interests, Krishna's desire. And that is the root cause of what it means to be a devotee. So therefore we see it is not necessarily one's personal level of purity that determines one's eligibility to be on the receiving end of Krishna's attention. Even if one might have a lot of other desires, and material conditioning might still be very strong. But if one is willing to direct one's attention towards Krishna's interests, then one immediately becomes eligible for Krishna's attention to be bestowed upon him. And really, a devotee is simply working his whole life, and he's arranging his whole life and making all his decisions in life to somehow, as Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, the devotee is willing to sacrifice everything for the good will of the Supreme Lord, to sustainably have Krishna be attentive to us. That is our hope. And every day that we are able to spend here or serve Krishna, chant Krishna's holy name, that is a successful day, because each of these days, they all add up to help us maintain the good grace of Krishna and move forward and ultimately becoming a pure devotee. So let us hear a few thoughts in this chapter, last chapter, the last verse in this chapter, before we enter into chapter 2, in which again Uddhava will now, in this chapter, remember Krishna. So he had just been questioned by Vidura about Krishna and Krishna's welfare and Krishna's family and everybody related to Krishna. And now Uddhava will have a long remembrance of what will happen, and then also the news will come out that actually the Lord had already disappeared. Okay, so let's hear any questions or any comments or any thing that anyone would like to share with us today. Dr. Joseph.
Thank you, Vilasa, for a wonderful class. It was very inspiring. You were saying before about how there were these three types of beings. There's like demons, demigods, and devotees. But you did say in the beginning there was four.
Sure.
Is there like a fourth or any more? Because like there are some people that I would maybe have come into contact with at some point in my life who probably didn't fall into any three of those categories. They weren't devotees, they weren't necessarily demons or demigods. They were like, you know, like neophytes. They were like, they're not devotees, but nor are they sort of like completely adverse to responsibility or completely for responsibility.
It's where we see that the Madhyam Adhikari, the different kinds of Vaishnavas are described in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. You see the Madhyam Adhikari, he is described as having the ability to distinguish between the different kinds of people. And in there we see they speak about the devotees, the Supreme Lord, and the innocent. Innocent obviously not meaning sinless, but innocent in the sense of being ignorant, not really knowing the difference between good and bad, and somehow having some good desires. Like some people have a basic sense of goodness, but they just don't really know. So therefore we see that category is also there, the innocent, just the average people that are not necessarily evil. But we see the problem with the material energies is that one ultimately does have to choose, because a lot of evil things are also committed by ordinary people. That is a fact. And that's what we're seeing. That's the problem when the demons ultimately, as Prabhupada says, when they take charge of the material world, then even the innocent people become more and more sinful, more and more, just like things that seem to be sort of relatively normal. Most people think of themselves as good people. But most people actually don't think that evil and I love it. They think, no, I'm relatively good and I'll be okay. Most people don't even think, no, I'm okay, and sort of, if at the end of life, even if heaven and hell is real, I'd probably go to heaven. I mean, I'm not that. There's people that are way worse than I am. But then we see that it is due to ignorance. So one properly understands what are the consequences, and a lot of it is bad philosophy. See, for example, in the Catholic Church, we have the whole doctrine that animals don't have souls. A big discussion in the Middle Ages about that. Thomas Aquinas, he wrote his whole dissertation of how animals are not really like humans. There's like a human soul, and then there's an animal. So animal is almost just like, it's like a piece of matter that's just a little animated, like a little robot. So therefore, to kill them, and they don't really feel pain. They don't really have pain. It's just like a nervous reaction. So we see bad philosophy that can have disastrous consequences and that make innocent people not sinless. But then you see many people when you present things to them properly, they realize, gosh, this is the actual thing. And you see now, for example, something like vegetarianism, like really spreading like wildfire, because people are fighting this myth and they're becoming aware of what's happening. So therefore, the devotees, they are favorably disposed towards the innocent, and they're interested in spreading knowledge, because most people, if knowledge is presented properly to them in the right way, then they will feel compelled that this is actually the right thing to do. And many people have that sense, but they just don't know. So these are the innocent people, and therefore the devotees, they take up their responsibility of being compassionate and being merciful. And that is ultimately Krishna's work. The whole job of the spiritual master, of becoming a guru, which means to become completely absorbed in Krishna's service, is simply to reach out to innocent people and to try to connect them with what is really true, and in that way bring them back to the point of becoming godly beings. So yes, the fourth category is there. Any other question or comment? Yes, bro.
Our attention to the spiritual activities that we do. In your experience, what helped you to maintain the attention when you do chanting or any other spiritual?
Well, at least I see now that I can personally see my life I've gone through different phases also. That's what I'm also appreciating now as I'm growing older in Krishna consciousness, that I see that there are different phases of one's life. And I think the trick in life is to, at each phase, to fully embrace the responsibilities of that phase. Like if I look back to my brahmachari days, even before I was at the temple here, I had the opportunity to study quite a lot. I had a good few years of just being able to, I wasn't part of a big temple like this, so much less work, it was much simpler. And I had the opportunity to study quite a bit. And that was, at that point, that sustained my Krishna consciousness, and it was a wonderful experience. And then I entered into another phase, coming to this temple, then that changed a bit. I lost my privilege, one could say, which is studying quite a bit. And then I had to find another means to stay more absorbed. And the literature was still a big part of it, but I couldn't necessarily study like I used to. But then my life changed. And then I could see that also responding properly to the responsibilities that I now have, that is also important for my absorption. And I can imagine as my life develops, as I will later grow older and get children or whatever, so I can see life also always changing. But therefore I do really appreciate those foundational years in Krishna consciousness, which has now given me familiarity with the literature. For me, very much, it is the books, reading, staying absorbed in reading and thought. I find to be an amazing way to be absorbed, and which is in one sense something that one should really invest in. Because just like anything, absorption is dependent to a large part, sometimes just on some familiarity. Like we see, like me and you both who like to work with stuff. So once the better you get at these things, the easier it is to do it for hours on end. Same with a musical instrument. You play an instrument, the first time you strum that guitar, it's difficult. Even 15 minutes of playing is not easy. Your fingers pain, and what can you play? You can play 2 chords. So it's very troublesome to play. But then the more and more you practice, the better you get, the more your attention can flow into that thing. And then you get these people, their consciousness can just flow into that instrument for hours. For hours they can just play. And it goes like that for anything in this world. Is familiarity is the basis of absorption. So therefore, seeing Krishna consciousness, one has to actually work hard to basically earn the ability to become absorbed in some form, something that is connected to Krishna. So for some people it's reading. So if you really put energy into studying, you really pay that price, you put hours into studying, becoming familiar, then you will be able to be absorbed in that literature very easy. And for other people it is kirtan or deity worship, so many other forms. But you have to choose, a few, for most of us it's a few. Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur explains that the devotees are absorbed in all 9 processes of devotional service, but it is natural at a certain point that some or one of these processes will become predominant. They will become predominant and they will be, they will receive more of our attention. So you have to get that. You have to get a process, sort of, try everything out and then sort of take something and become really absorbed in it. And you have to pay that price to become absorbed, just like anything in this world. And the challenge now, I would say for most people, the challenge now in the modern world to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, as they say, this is nice stating from I think it was a Colombian author, I can't remember his name. He says that in a world in which everything is published, you are defined not by what you know, but by what you ignore. So in the modern world, where there's so much instant absorption available at your fingertips, like you can instantly, for 2, 3, 4 hours, to spend 4 hours on YouTube is not difficult. Any of us can do it. You can just, and you go. So for the most part in the modern world, that is the danger of being absorbed, is to be careful of things that pull your attention in. So these two things go side by side to stay absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So to find one of the spiritual one of the processes, the 9 parts of devotional service, to invest in these things, and to at the same time be careful of those other things that steal our time and energy, because we need to invest, as I say, there's a learning curve. One has to invest a certain amount of hours into the processes of devotional service before one will be able to be absorbed in them consistently, just like anything else in this world. And it is important to remember that. And the thing, one of the major stumbling blocks is that we convince ourselves that the reason I'm not getting absorbed is anything else besides the fact that I'm not practicing enough. Like we say, I just don't like this, I don't like to read. You hear that oftentimes. People say, no, I'm just not a reader, I don't really like to read. Or we say, oh no, I'm somehow, I just don't Krishna, and find it difficult to sort of be absorbed in Krishna or here. It's all just excuses that we make. Because the reality is that our attention is just sucked into so many other things. And just like, for example, if you want to eat prasadam, you have to be hungry. Otherwise you will not eat anything. Even if it's a wonderful meal served, you have no appetite. So similarly, when it comes to what we are absorbed in, we have to make sure we have an appetite. And because our appetite is ruined by being absorbed in so many other things, therefore we look at Krishna consciousness and this doesn't look very tasty. But this is because we have no appetite, because we have already eaten, we have already filled our consciousness with other things, and you can only eat that much. So these two things coming together. And as a final point, when it comes to somehow becoming excited, I think the most important ingredient, at least as I look towards my own life, is that somehow I was fortunate to associate with people that were very enthusiastic about certain aspects of Krishna consciousness, like with the literature. And if you can somehow, that is something you can obtain from other devotees. If a devotee has great enthusiasm and absorption in a specific field of devotional service, you are able to share, you are able to get some of that by just associating with a devotee, being with them, and sort of sharing their own excitement for Krishna consciousness. And that is valuable. That is something that one has to really search out whenever the opportunity arises. And at a certain point, you share a little bit, and at a certain point it happens, it stays. You also actually become independently excited about certain prospects of Krishna consciousness. Any other questions? Okay, I think we can end here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gopimanande. Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to have you here. Hare Krishna.